I have these two bodies of work. I always say they're very different bodies of work. The close-up series is a very rigid style of portrait photography, very much influenced by Bernd and Hiller Becher and August Sander, that puts people into a certain light, into this like very reduced portrait setting where it's all about the face, all about the person. It doesn't matter if you're a king or a queen, you're just plain background, you don't even see the clothes. It just becomes all about the face and the eyes and the lips ultimately, this shallow depth of field. My other body of work, basically what happened is everybody hired me to do these close-up portraits, and in the beginning I had 10 minutes with somebody, so I would only do my close-up portrait, but all of a sudden I was given an hour or 2 hours, so I had to do something else. And it was a great luxury of then being able to play around. So my early magazine work looked a lot more like Annie Leibovitz because I worked with her for so long. And then I started to migrate away from it, and I think more and more my personality came out, my playfulness started to shine through. And now, I can do a beautiful, simple studio portrait in any kind of lighting scenario because, I learned so much doing the lighting for Annie. But it kind of always bores me. I always feel like there has to be something else. It has to be more than just a simple portrait. It has to, it has to have some wit or some humor or some energy to it, or an element of surprise. I think coming from Germany and growing up in Germany, when it is not very common to have idols, in Germany, given the horrible past that we have, we don't grow up with admiring celebrities. Nobody, says there's no heroes. That you wouldn't say, oh, this or that person is my hero. Maybe Nelson Mandela, somebody like him, but for the most part, you grow up without idolizing anybody, and you don't have as much respect and admiration for these famous people. I think that enabled me to be, just treat them more as people, not being so intimidated by their presence, not being always thinking I have to put them on a pedestal. These are these celebrated people that need to be treated differently than everybody else. I would say not many like what I do. I think everybody is vainer than we think, and it's very few people that are happy to look the way they look, especially when nowadays photography makes everybody look 20 years younger and 10 pounds lighter. You don't want to have your picture taken and just look the way you look. So yeah, I have that problem sometimes that, I have an assignment and the publicist will say, yeah, Martin Schoeller can do this job, but he cannot do one of his close-ups, so that does happen. I think photography in general is a lie. I don't think there's a truthful picture because it's just a split second, and capturing the soul is overused terms. I always find it very, very cheesy and pretentious because a person, sometimes sad, sometimes happy, a picture just picks one single moment in their life and a split second in a certain kind of lighting, and then the photographer edits the film and finds the frame that they think of a person that they don't even know, does that person justice. So it's a very subjective enterprise, photography. But within that realm of photography, I think there's pictures that are maybe a little bit more honest than others. I don't think necessarily so much truth, but maybe they're a little bit closer to this person's personality than others. So I'm trying to stay to the little bit more honest spectrum. Photographing Jeff Koons there was a second time I photographed him, and photographing an artist like him is a great opportunity because his art is so inspiring. I really respect him as an artist. I love his work. He has a similar sense of humor and love his work than I do. But on the other hand, I think he's the highest selling artist of our times or ever, and he has a certain image that he wants to, bring across. So talking me into painting him white and putting flowers on his head was not that easy. He had just done this series of these white plaster sculptures, so the idea was to put him, turn him into a sculpture himself. Yeah, it took me a long time to convince him that this was the way to go. I painted one of my assistants white, and when he saw how stunning this image looks, he signed on and said, okay, let's try it. Michael Douglas was great because he had just played in this movie Behind the Candelabra, which is about this musician from the 70s, 80s who was obviously gay but always pretended to be straight, Liberace, and he wore makeup in that movie at times. So to talk him into the makeup, you know, you never know. But the whole shoot came about, they called me, do you want to photograph Michael Douglas? I'm sure, of course, he's great. Where do you want to photograph him? I said, well, I always like to photograph people at home. That's my first choice of location. And his publicist says, yeah, sure, do you want to come by and scout his apartment? I'm like, okay. So 2 hours later, I'm checking out his apartment on the Upper West Side, and the shoot was 2 days later. He had to leave by 10, so we had to photograph, I think, from 8 till 10, or from 9 to 11, something like that. So we ended up setting up in his apartment at 6 o'clock in the morning, and Michael Douglas was walking around serving us coffee. So there is the exceptions to the rule, and he was wearing he was willing to wear a pink bathrobe and lay on his green couch. So sometimes you're, wow, photographer, being a photographer is great when everything comes together that easily. Photography is not a democratic enterprise, you know, it's a photographer's vision that should matter most. And that's also why I don't, luckily, never hear from my subjects if they like the pictures or not. So you don't feel, you don't feel responsible. You shouldn't feel responsible for their happiness. I still don't have any gods. Nothing. I'm a godless man. Yeah. I have people that I would love to photograph for, because I respect them for their work. So, Daniel Day-Lewis is on my list. I think he's maybe the best living actor. And Mick Jagger, Keith Richards would be awesome. Close-up of those would be a dream. People have said my photographs are almost like a short film put into one picture, which I like that comparison. I don't know how well I would do directing. I always wonder if I would be good at directing a movie. It's hard enough to be a good photographer.